Alright, so I've got a recording here of, this is what, 5-0 on PokerStars. Who was it that gave it to me? Mul. Thanks for that. Let's just go through it. And if you have any questions, just let me know. We'll just be discussing the different hands. How does it zoom? Great, excellent. Open on the button, 2.4, that's pretty standard. Yeah, face it down. I'm not sure what that's about. Is there a particular reason why you didn't bet the turn there? Is there more? No, I'm not talking. Alright, just keep going. Or would have been better to bet the turn on that one. It seems like you're using your HUD quite a bit, which at this level is probably unnecessary. All right. It's gonna lead you to overthink a lot of stuff. Let me turn it off. Yeah, that hand sound fine, so it's probably the defend multi-way. It's probably an okay defend multi-way, to be honest. We'll get there. We're about to 11, that's a good size. This particular hand is also pretty good. I mean, like here in the hijack, it's probably not necessary to go this big. Even though your hand is pretty nice, like just going 2.4 from every position is probably not the way to do it, even at the very low levels, because you're going to end up paying too much break. Okay. Yeah, you get 4-bet, let it go. Yeah, that's a pretty good fold out of the small blind there against the cutoff open. The superconnectors don't play too well multi-way. Sorry, don't play too well out of position. If it was multi-way, then maybe you could consider calling. So decision to what is to bet this. Is there a particular reason why? Yeah, you might.
I'm having trouble with the mic, and I'm also having a little bit of lag with the question, so I'm not really following.
Yeah. Okay. Well, your mic's working now. So here's this question. You got the ace jack. All right. You've opened in the cutoff, and then the button's called, and you've decided to bet a quarter of the pot here on the jack ball 6. Why have you decided to do this?
I find these boards kind of dry, and I don't need to use a bigger sizing to effectively achieve the same thing to bring down the pot.
Yeah, do you want to fold, do you?
Pardon?
Do you want
Well,
to fold?
not in this case. I need to, well, theoretically with this hand, I want to get called often because I want to get money from it. On the other hand, with other holdings that he chooses not to, then, for example, when I have bluffs or something, or I can effectively see a bit of wider range here and also benefit other hands that can benefit from a small sizing. I don't know if
Which
on one hand,
which hands benefit from a small size?
well, my was to effectively see bit range here with this sizing on this try board. So
Why are you doing that when button's got a stronger range than you do? You're just giving the button 1.6 big blinds for free.
do you think big blind's range here, his calling range is stronger here on such boards?
Yeah.
Don't we expect his Broadway hands effectively or pocket pairs to be betting?
Well, a lot of his broadways have hit, and now he's got 2 or 3 sets.
Yeah, yeah, he has 4s and 6s. We don't expect him to have strong jacks though. King jacks, ace jacks,
Why
queen
not?
jacks wouldn't be
Why
a
not?
bit.
Why not?
Not usually. I would expect the bigger portion of hands to be three betting.
You can go ace jack, king jack, queen jack, jack 10.
True. Do you expect people to be calling more of these hands instead of three betting?
Well, I mean, he's going to be 3-betting more often, but like in terms of the density of the hands in his range, he's got to have a lot of sets here.
So we prefer to go for bigger sizings and polarize. So half pot and more, maybe 66%.
Yeah, I mean, if you think 66% is large, you gotta work a bit on your bet sizing. This is a board. This is a board where you'd be checking a lot of the time. In fact, most of the time when you're out of position, you get called by the button or something. You're going to be checking a lot of the time. There are a few exceptions with like ace king kind of boards, like ace king brick, ace queen brick, where you might want to have a bit of an overbetting range, because the in-position player almost never has anything that hits that board quite very strongly at all. But besides that, a lot of the time when you open out of position, you get called by in position. You should be checking a lot.
Okay, and do we bet with stronger hands? And what would an ideal sizing be? So overbetting or close betting?
Well, if you did want to bet this, you just pot it, right?
Okay.
You've got to remember about the 50% rule, so you should be constructing your checking range to try to prevent the in-position player from betting into you more than half the time. You should be attempting to do that. I mean, they might be betting slightly more than half the time, and that's probably okay, even at equilibrium. But if your checking range is really, really weak, then like they're just going to bet their entire range, and you're just going to have to fold. And then when you've got a very strong hand, like an overpair or a set or something, those kinds of hands would then much rather check raise, because they end up getting the free chips from the person who's bet into you. All right. Let's keep going. Okay, so like so you made the first bet, he made a 2-bet. This line here doesn't actually make any sense. So you call or only bet like the pot on the turn. He called again. He checks and marks alright. Bit of a strange line by him. Did you ever consider raising the turn? Here with the ace-jack?
Not really, because I didn't give much credit to the sizing. I would expect him, if he did want to raise bigger with value hands, would probably be a bigger sizing. So,
Or so if you don't give credit to his size, then why don't you raise?
to persuade him effectively, to give him an incentive to keep bluffing into me instead of
well, I mean, if you think he's got a weak hand, you should just raise for value.
Okay.
Not really sure about whether he's bluffing. Yeah, we'll keep going. Why are you raising this? So why are you raising the folds here?
Is it wrong to isolate the limper with this hand?
Yeah.
Okay. So the hand selection is not. Oh, I mean, goes hand in hand. The hand selection and the sizing, I assume, is wrong. Yes.
Well, I mean, the sizing is probably not too bad, but definitely the hand selection is a bit strange.
A little bit weak.
You get the 1 big blind.
7 or 8 plus. Okay.
You get the 1 big blind for TH. Well, no, I mean against a low jack, you probably only want to do it with like 10s plus, to be honest.
Okay.
If against the cutoff, then maybe you could think about something like 8s and 7s, but against a low jack, you're probably fairly tight. He's limp, so just limp behind, and you play in position, and even if it goes multi-way, which it basically always will, potentially even 4-way, like you're still doing well with a hand that can flop a set. And isolating isn't particularly good. Like what happens if he 3-bets you? It's just not a pretty picture. I mean, you probably could consider folding that before the flop if you think that the small blind there was just gonna shove a lot of the time. Yeah, so here when you've got two players that are short, you should be folding these kinds of hands out of the low jack. So like these kinds of hands are really like they're 0 EV when you're 100 big blinds deep, but when you're 50 big blinds deep, well, they're 0 EV when you're 100 big blinds deep and you open for a min raise. When you're 50 big blinds deep and you open for 2.4, you're just going to lose some money doing this. So really you got to work on your pre-flop range there. Yeah, so you've got the same issue here with c-betting this board. That doesn't really make too much sense to be c-betting. Here with the fours, you probably could have considered raising the flop against the small donk. So the river call is fine. But here on the left, with this particular hand on this board, you're just giving money away for free unnecessarily by making a small c-bet. The imposition doesn't really have to fold too many hands. because their range is a lot stronger than yours. And you're just going to get raised a lot. So better to just check, and then if you bet, you can fold. And if you check behind, then you can get to see the turn for free. All right.
Yes, so we do a lot of pot controlling effectively when we're out of position with these hands, and we prefer to polarize in a sense with the strongest part of our range. Because if we keep betting small all the time, then we give them the opportunity to float more and then also attack us on the turn, and we have to overfold, right?
Well, there you've got a very weak hand when you're out of position. So all the time you should just be giving up. Did you ever consider donking this turn?
Not really, because I don't employ donking in my game, so I haven't studied any spots. I pretty much never donk.
All right. Well, that's probably something you should work on. Yeah, there's plenty of spots where donking is really nice. So. Why are you raising to this size? I don't understand. What's going on here? Is there a particular reason you've chosen this 3-bet size?
I mean, sometimes I do 3-bet when I'm out of position and do 3-bet a little bit higher, but in this case,
Yeah, you're on the button, so.
Yeah, I think I went a little bit overboard here. I usually would do something between 3.5 and 4.
Okay, well, there's recommended 3-bet sizes on the website.
Okay.
So like here you're facing 2.5. What's the 3-bet size going to be? It's going to be 7.5 probably, maybe 8. Going to 11 is excessive, and you can basically just play 4-bet or fold into you. If you play 4-bet or fold, aces loses a lot of value. So yeah, I'd avoid doing stuff like this. Mm-hmm. The exception, of course, is unless you've got some kind of array where they're just very cool, happy, then yeah, sure, just make it really big with aces. Yeah, why did you choose this bet size? What's going on with this 1/3 bet?
Not really sure, to be honest. I consider this a little bit dry. I mean, on one hand, he can probably call with queens and nines, and he will probably also have some queen X, to have some smaller pair potentially float. I mean, it's a little bit hard for me to explain the thought process. It's kind of I'm actually working on those sizings, and so sometimes I'm not really sure what the best sizing is to use. So I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what I'm doing.
Sure, that's okay. Everyone starts somewhere. So like, if you use a very big size on the previous street, what does that mean on the next street?
Theoretically, when he is happy to call such a big 3-bet, then his range is stronger post flop.
Yeah, so his range is going to be pretty strong here.
Yes.
But not necessarily polar. So you've got the aces and kings. Mm-hmm. I mean, both of you have got queens probably. I mean, he's got nines. He might not have nines. He might not have all the nines, to be honest. If he's smart, he should fold nines some of the time to that 3-bet. So like when you got aces and kings, which is going to be the main value component, the stack pot ratio is like 4.5, so you're not really too worried about running into a set. Or you should be more worried about trying to stack a queen as often as you can. So when you've got this hand or kings, like, why is it that you want to be betting a particular hand for a particular size? Aces, how many combinations of ace queen does this block? The offsuit version, quite a lot. Does he have it in many of the offsuit forms of ace queen? Maybe not. The suited forms, probably he has all of them still. Blocks one combination of that. So like if you want to put aces into a particular size alongside kings, you might want to choose a bigger size on this kind of board. On the other hand, when you've got like ace king, right, maybe a bit of ace queen yourself, particularly ace king, like what are you going to do with that? What other hands might you use as well? If you got some stuff like king jack king 10, which I got short, ace jack, which is just like a some overcard kinds of hands, and then maybe some stuff like suited connectors, which I totally missed this. I think jack 10 is probably a fold, so you should be going fairly polar, right? And because you want to be betting a kind of a polar range, you probably want to be betting a bit bigger. So this small size is saying that you want to be betting at a high frequency, which is probably not correct given the relative strength of the ranges here. You made this big 3 bet, so his range is going to be stronger, so you can't want to be checking back a bit more. So yeah, just be wary about that when you're going from one street to the next street. If you've made a big bet on the previous street, you're usually going to be checking more on the next street. If that makes sense. And here, this particular spot, it's not a board that like smashes your pre-flop bluffs. If there was an ace or a king, then suddenly ace king has made top pair top picker. So then a lot of your pre-flop ranges become very strong, and so maybe you want to be betting an ace or king high board small. But when it comes queen high or lower, ace king is missed, which was your biggest pre-flop bluff or semi-bluff, whatever you want to call it. And because that particular hand is missed, you probably want to polarize now. Anyway, let's move on.
What sizing do you think is good there on that ace, the ace's hand, or checking?
With the bet size I probably use is like closer to 3/4. Maybe I check aces sometimes. Probably not checking kings.
Right. Okay.
Particular reason why you check aces because you also block ace queen. So like when he does bet into you, he's basically always bluffing. So nice to have that. I'm not sure about this fold. That fold's a bit tight. I mean, if you want to do something besides calling with that hand, you could full bet. there's a particular reason why you chose this size on this board. And on the left.
Theoretically, I view. I mean, now that I look at the sizing, I would opt out to for bigger sizing. I view this board as quite connected. Even though both players do have extremely wide ranges, I would probably elect to go for a more polarized approach. So bet bigger with my value hands, and this is an okay bluff. And I would also use a bigger sizing with this one. Probably 75, 80%, or maybe higher with particular hands. And then also, I mean, on the other hand, you can also have weaker hands. So if I use this thing, I can also add this bluff with this sizing and use a slightly wider range. I would definitely not bet third pot because then I don't want to have an extremely wide range c-betting here. I think the reason behind it is to bet bigger in a way. I don't think I like the 57. I would probably go for bigger. Reasoning is I want to have bluffs and strong value hands.
Yeah, okay. I gotta go low.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Like a lot of the time I feel that with weaker hands, blind versus blind, the EV, when we bet like our 3 big blinds, the EV is in villain just folding. Okay. When he calls, unless we kind of flop something decent, isn't kind of betting weaker hands kind of just giving back the EV that we don't want to do? Do you know what I'm getting at?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. So it's like pre-flop small blind versus big blind. The small blind's usually got a tighter range than the big blind does. Because the big blind's got the discount and is in position.
Right, but a lot of the time the EV is in opening the small blind is in just the big blind folding. So when he doesn't fold and we don't flop well, isn't just kind of betting out of position kind of giving that EV back when he does call?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
All right, I'll think about it and try and ask the question better.
Yeah, so like when you're in the small blind and you're against a big blind, you've got a tighter range than the big blind does. So like usually that means that you're going to be betting fairly frequently on most flops. I'll say that 5 times fast. So on this particular board, sure, you're going to have probably a pot size range, overbet range, that kind of stuff, small overbet range. And then the other size is probably going to be smaller purely for like equity denial, thin value, that kind of stuff. Like you can almost value bet any pair on this board, really thin for value, and you can do that for a small size. So like with this particular hand, I wouldn't mind either a small size or a big size, but this size just doesn't make too much sense with any of your hands. Like if you got like an overpair 9s plus, or like ace 8 or something, like they want to go big because right now they're essentially the nuts, and it's difficult to get value if an overcard comes on the next street, unless you've removed overcards from the position player's range by betting big. Right. On the other hand, if you've got like a pair of 2s, a pair of 6s, like maybe you can bet small to just trying to deny equity from those overcards, to get value from those overcards. Right. So it's different parts of your range want to get value from different parts of the opponent's range. So to reiterate that, if you've got a strong pair, overpair, they want to get value from other pairs. They don't want an overcard to come on the turn to spoil things. So those hands are either going to bet big or they're going to check raise here. A bunch of middling pairs might want to bet small to try and get value from ace high, that kind of stuff. So you missed and give up, that's good. Alright, what's happening here? Network status, you got aces, you threw bet. Okay, let's just start here. Now, why only 9? Why not like 11 when you're doing it before?
Isn't 11 too big?
Well, you made it 9. I mean, why are you betting this big? Why are you betting this size on this board? Yeah. Especially after you made it 9 pre-flop. And then you bet 3/4 pot. Why have you decided to do this?
Try and get just play straightforward and trying to get money. I know I block with my kings. I block a lot of his king X, and other than that, it's really hard for him to continue with sizing. But
What other hands are you doing with this?
I will probably get called with.
No, what other hands are you gonna make this bet size?
Ace Queen of Diamonds, Ace Jack of Diamonds, Ace 10. Some 9s I have.
Okay, so what's going on for value then? What other hand value bet this size?
Kings and 9s. Ace King. Some King Queens.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty dubious. I mean, you've made the small 3-bet pre-flop out of position, so, and then you flopped a board that's really good for your pre-flop range. So a lot of the time you just want to be betting small to try and deny equity from like your opponent's kind of overcards and get value from a bunch of those pocket pairs that your opponent's got in their range. So when you've got like Ace King, King Queen, King 6 or whatever, it's usually good, yep, on this kind of board, especially after you made the small pre-flop size. The range is filled with pocket pairs, so you want to bet small to try and get value from those pocket pairs. Okay. Kings, especially, like, because you heavily block a king, in order to get the most value that you kind of want your opponent to raise you. So, the way you get more value is actually by betting small or even checking, to try and induce your opponent to bet into you, and then you can call down raise river or raise it down, something like that. So here, like, if you only like to use one size, because you made that small bet before the flop, it's probably okay to be betting a large portion of your range for a small size on this flop. I think closer to a third or a quarter. of course, you probably do want some hands to check raise as well. Maybe you can check raise with something like aces. Okay.
Yes.
But I don't really see any hands going for this big size on this board. I just don't feel it makes sense with respect to what happened before the flop. Okay, someone there on the left. You 3-bet and someone called and then check and they talked into you. Yeah, there you go. Why did you check this board? What do you do?
It's really hard for me to represent something on such a board. I probably never have any set, so I pretty much don't have any value hands. I do have aces, kings, queens, those overcards, but can't represent any bluffs effectively. So I'd rather check range and hold down. Also, I don't really know what he's calling with. Squeeze, I would assume something like nines plus. I don't really think he has any sets on that board, and he would probably bet half with some Broadway hands if he chooses so. So it's really hard for him to represent something, but it's also hard for me to see bet on that board. I don't know if the ace king is a good bluff to have.
Yeah, so like you've got all the ace king, and he shouldn't really have too much ace king. Maybe he's got some ace queen, ace jack, and then like some of the pocket pairs like tens and jacks, maybe nines, and then maybe some other weird shit as well. But knowing all of that, like your range is polar from pre-flop, right? It's polar in the sense that you've got all the big pocket pairs, and then you've got these big Broadway hands, which have now missed. Okay. So because of that range polarity, and this board isn't particularly very strong for your range, and even though your range is polar, your range is much weaker than your opponent's on this kind of board. Usually you want to be checking a lot of the time, so I mean checking this hand is fine. But then when you face this kind of bet, which is a half block bet, which is fairly big, right? I would have expected any player that knows what they were doing to bet quite small to try and get called by ace king, right? Because like if they've got a pocket pair, they're trying to get value from your ace king and trying to avoid getting check raised by aces or kings. So when they bet big like this, if you're thinking about letting go of ace king, especially with the backdoor diamond, like probably don't do that. So like if you're folding ace king, you're basically folding the entirety of your range besides the pocket pairs, right? And like if you've got, say for example, tens plus and then like Broadway, that tens plus is going to be 30-ish combinations out of like 100 combinations. So then if you're folding up to ace king, then you're folding 70% of the time. So you're just massively overfolding here. And then like if you got aces and kings and want to check raise, like what do you check raise as a bluff? Doesn't make too much sense in terms of like your range construction. Even if you want to be tighter than average because he called, that's probably okay. But probably shouldn't be folding ace king. If you don't want to call, then just raise. There's like there's nothing wrong with just ripping it in, getting and trying to quarter the guy, and then when you have aces and kings yourself, like you just stack him. On the other hand, like if you call, then an ace or a king comes, and you can start donking. So it's like if an ace comes and he's got ace queen, then you're just going to stack him. So yeah, there you go.
Be a good sizing to raise. Are we shoving?
Well, you could shove if you wanted to. You could put in half your stack. But if you put in half your stack, you probably can't fold. Put in more than half your stack, you probably can't fold. And there's actually nothing wrong with doing that. So I'm going for a non all-in size, even though you're not folding most of your hands. Alright, I mean, if you're playing in a pool where people like to overcall your squeezes, then just squeeze bigger. So the guy's king there, just squeeze even bigger than that. I mean, when it goes call, 3x open, like there's nothing wrong with going like 20, 21. Because there's so much dead money in the middle already. You could even consider as like ripping ace king offsuit or ace queen offsuit in that particular spot, just because there's already 10 blinds in the middle when you've got 100 behind. Yeah, okay, pretty straightforward stuff so far. I mean, maybe you could have let go of the 5s earlier on, but calling isn't too bad either. Yeah, okay, so here this bet doesn't make any sense. There's not a lot of hands that would want to bet this size. mean, there's a lot of hands that want to check back, and a lot of hands that want a bit bigger, but not a lot of hands that want a bit 2/3 of the pot or whatever. So with this particular hand, with the straight draw flush draw, I'd probably go quite big. So the pot's 5, you might make it 5, you might make it 7. If you're really adventurous, you can make it 10, but yeah, on that kind of board, with that kind of hand, you want a bit big. Yeah, okay. I mean, get back a bit. So here, why did you check this hand in the first place? So you opened, and then what happened? So you 3-betted, you were something.
He 3-bet and I called, I think.
You 3-bet call. All right. Why did you call the 3-bet?
I mean, if it was a larger sizing, I would probably fold. But I mean, I do see a lot of people actually 3-betting quite bigger, so 9, 10, 11x. So I think the thought process there was, okay, it's fairly smaller than. I would sometimes call, sometimes fold. In this case, I elected to call. I know it's not the best hand because we will be playing out of position the entire hand. Do you think with this sizing we should always be folding?
Yeah, so like, for example, this here, cutoff versus button. I probably have new cutoff ranges, to be honest, up soon. Ace jack offsuit, king queen offsuit are your folds or 4-bets. So if you want to continue with this hand, you probably just 4-bet it. But folding is probably superior, unless you know that your opponent is has a reasonably good 3-bet range. So if you're confident that your opponent's a decent player, then you could 4-bet it. If you're not, then you should fold, because their range is too strong. Calling is probably the worst thing you can do before the flop. So anyway, so you decide to call. So like when you think about what kind of range you've got, we can look at it here. Right. So you got king queen, a little bit king 10, a little bit king 9. You might got a bunch of 10s, right? In terms of the set, you got the set of 10s. You got a little bit of the set of 6s. I mean, most of the pocket pairs you got half the time, so you got a little bit of sets of 6s, a little bit of set of 10s. And he's bet this more into you, so he's going to be betting a lot of his kings. If you've got a king yourself, you probably could be raising it. So for example, if you've got king queen on this board, right, king queen from preflop, you could raise it. Maybe you want to raise this hand as well, or ace jack, with a backdoor. I mean, this hand you shouldn't really have it from preflop, but because you do, you could probably raise it because you've got the backdoor there. Calling is probably not too bad, just because like you just kind of check through on the turn enough of the time and you can stab the river. So I don't mind that. So you decide to call, you make a straight. I mean, I'm not loving these notes that you're making. Make a straight, checks through. Then you decide to bet this hand. Why do you want to bet this hand here instead of go for like a check raise?
I wasn't really sure if Villeneuve is capable of bluffing into us or actually going value themselves. So, given that, I don't expect him to check a lot on that turn, because when he 3-bets and he c-bets flop, now he will start to vertically polarize. We do block hands in his 3-bet range. We do block his straight, so but he still has kings, he still has tens, he still has queens, king queen type of hands. The fact that he's checking on that turn.
Okay, so why did you want to bet the river instead of check raising the river?
I mean, on one hand, you become greedy. You want to bet into him with the hopes that he's capable of calling. On the other hand,
if he's capable of calling, what hand in particular? What hands in particular?
Probably something like King Jack.
Okay, if he's got King Jack and you check, will he bet King Jack?
I'm not really sure, and that's why I was about to say that maybe it's better to check and give them all the chances to either bluff or go for thin himself, instead of betting into him, which is a sign of strength that he's capable of folding these type of hands.
Thomas, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when the turn goes check, check, all right. If out of position checks, theoretically, doesn't the button here have to bet all his bluffs? He'll check anything with showdown, and he'll bet value more or less, but he can't. He's not going to show down a weak hand. He has to bet his bluffs if the turn goes check, check, right?
Well, I mean, he can have some stuff that gives up. So the turn went check, check. So he bet the flop, and then we went check, check on the turn. He can give up some stuff. Right, he can't just bet everything.
Okay.
Because here the opposition player's range is going to be stronger. The question then is like, maybe you should weaken your range sufficiently that they have to bet anything without any kind of showdown value at all. So maybe that's what's going on. So like if you've got a pocket pair with like a diamond that might have wanted to float the flop. They gets here and wants to check the showdown, and he's got a very weak pair or ace high still. Then maybe those kinds of hands will want to be bluffing. So it's got to be about like how you construct your checking range, and like looking back to like pre-flop, if you got ace queen, ace 10. And you got a bunch of 2 pairs now, don't you? A lot of these pocket pairs. Right, if you got a queen or a king, you could probably value bet them. Maybe even at 10, you could go really, really tiny. What about if you got like a naked ace? Maybe you want to be bluffing that, but then if you got ace 10 or ace queen, you might want to be checking them, because the in position player might try to check back some of his stuff. But what aces would he check back? Maybe he would check back ace6, ace4. Maybe he would check back his own ace10, but what about his unpaired aces? Unpaired ace-x hands. Maybe those hands will have to bluff here. So if those hands have to bluff, then maybe having an ace is not amazing for you in terms of putting this hand in the check raise range. Alright. So if this hand isn't good in the check raise range because he's going to be betting a lot of his ace-x, which you block, right? Then like, what's the alternative? How do you get all the money in? Maybe you can just go all in yourself. Which doesn't seem too bad, to be honest. Doesn't seem too bad. He's like super capped on his brick river. Yeah. So now that I think about it, I probably would have just gone all in. Rather than betting the size that you bet what, 77 was it?
Yes.
And what's the benefit of betting all in? You fold out all of his ace-x, which doesn't really matter. So you block the folding range because you hold the ace of diamonds, which is nice. Maybe block a bit of other stuff. And what's the strongest hand that he could have? Maybe he could have aces. Maybe you could have the king sometimes. Maybe, but a lot of time it's going to be stuff like ace queen, isn't it? Ace queen or queen jack. Anyway, it just feels like you're missing out on value by not doing something else with this hand. Because if you just bet 77, I mean, sure, if he's got a king or a queen, he's going to call you, but like if he's got a king or a queen, like he might bet into you if you check anyway. So like you want to get more value out of those particular hands from your opponent, and so you can go even bigger, I would think. And like if you think that a 4x river shove is big, it's not really. Because you're playing no limit hold'em, you can bet any size you want. Alright, pretty standard preflop stuff. That's good. You should try to avoid pressing the automatic fold button in the big blinds. Because sometimes the small blind's going to min raise you, and like if you look at the ranges for defending against the min raise from the small blind, it's really wide. So you'll end up overfolding. And on the other hand, like if your opponents are doing that too, then like you should just min raise basically your entire range, or even wider than that. So this is just a fold here. This is a really bad call. I'm not sure why you decided to call that at all. King 8 could be open from the small blind there. Yes, this way is a bit small. So like usually if you open to 2.4, you might want to just 3-bet to 13 out of the big blind it was just against the cutoff open. But when it's cutoff open and call, you might want to go a bit bigger.
Would something like 15 be okay?
Yeah, you go 15. That 4-bet's very big. That 4-bet's pretty big. You should probably just go closer to 20. Okay. Now, why don't you just go all in? Yeah, like I'm not sure why you didn't just go all in yourself on this flop. Like if he's got queens, he's going to shove anyway, so that doesn't matter. Like you always lose your stack against queens. But if he's got like 10s and 9s, and like that's nice, and then you end up folding some stuff. And even if he's got ace queen, you might have to call as well. Yeah, probably you probably should have 4-betted that 4-bet the hand a bit smaller.
I find these spots a little bit weird because of probably the wrong sizing I choose in some 3-bet pots and 4-bet pots that I arrive on the flop and I'm not really sure sizing to use.
Yeah, so the way to overcome that is to do some study in your 3-bet pots and 4-bet pots. So everyone studies single raise pot to death, even though they're not super interesting. Everyone likes to study them. But it goes back to the whole difference between the breadth of knowledge and depth of knowledge. You really want a good breadth of knowledge instead of some depth, because then you'll know what mistakes you're making and what mistakes you're not making. Even if it's at the surface level, you might not know individual combos and what blockers and exact frequencies, blah blah blah. But knowing what sizes to use and what kinds of flops in different pre-flop configurations or formations, however you want to label it, is actually very, very important. And studying them quite broadly is going to make you a lot more money than studying like a single raise pot very deeply. Like a single raise pot formation very deeply. Yeah, that's really bad. Okay, he decides to call anyway. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of mistakes there. All right, so you open and you get called from the small blind. All right. Usually, when the small blind calls, their range is going to be significantly stronger than yours on a lot of boards. I mean, this one included, but you've got stuff like ace king and ace queen with the small blind. Doesn't have that much ace king. It's probably got a little bit of ace queen. But like if you got ace king, then maybe you could bet big, right? Is the main sort of takeaway. So you got ace king, ace 10, ace 5. Maybe those hands could bet big. Aces doesn't really want to bet big. It doesn't really want to bet small either. So maybe you could consider checking it. If you do want to have a small bet range, I'd actually probably just avoid having a small bet range here against a small blind, because it doesn't make too much sense for too many of your hands to do that. So maybe with ace king you can pot it, ace king, ace queen, ace 10 instead of 5s, all that kind of stuff. That stuff can pot it, and then maybe with aces you might want to check back, and just let them catch up a bit, right? Because you can always raise aces later because you're in position. So you end up betting the half pot right? And then he calls, and then the 3 is a brick. You get 2 flush draws. So here with the 2 flush draws, the out of position player is you as the in position player, you want to bet fairly frequently to try and deny equity from those flush draws, right? Rather than infrequently. So because you want to bet frequently, you should be betting a small size, right? So maybe you want to be betting half pot, something like that. Okay, and then the out of position player is going to check raise you a lot. Overbetting doesn't really accomplish too much, in my opinion. Because like if most of your hands are overbetting, then like you're going to be checking back a lot, and so you just let him see the river for free a lot of the time. Because like remember, like if you bet half pot or if you bet 1.5 times the pot, the EV of him having a flush draw becomes roughly close to 0. If 1.5 times the pot is probably 0, but if you bet like half the pot, it goes from like one third of the pot down to like 1 or 2 big blinds. So it's not that much. So by betting half pot, you accomplish just as much if your opponent's holding a flush draw than if you bet 1.5 times the pot or 2 times the pot or all in, because the EV difference that you get for making the bet that's that much bigger doesn't really change anything in terms of those hands. So overbetting here aces. Like maybe if you have some stuff like ace king and stuff, you could overbet that here, but as we discussed already, like the ace king and ace queen wants to go bigger on the flop, so you don't have that here. Here you're saying that you got like hand as ace jack or something, ace jack, some other ace, some 10, and if you've got those kinds of hands and you're trying to like get thin value from a pocket pair and deny a bit of equity from his draws with the 2 flush draws, then you should just bet kind of small, and then kind of check back the river. So overbetting doesn't make too much sense to me. Yeah, so you overbet, and then he checks you. So like if he's got the flush, he should just bet himself all the time. Of course, if you know your opponent's not doing that, then checking back aces is totally fine. It's debatable that maybe you should just check back aces anyway, because like what else are you getting called by? You're not getting called by much because you block all of his ace-x. So maybe if you're thinking about a set to check back, then this is the one to do it with. But say for example you got a set of 10s or a set of 5s somehow in the same line, then like those hands will want to go all in, try and get value over an ace. Sure, he might have a flush sometimes, but like a lot of his flushes should just bet the river himself after calling that overbet on the turn. And the overbet on the turn wasn't even that big, so hopefully that makes sense. You got to study up on these field versus small blind formations a little bit, because it's going to happen, and you're going to have plenty of stuff going on when you're finding a small blind yourself. Yeah, so like just give up there.
So playing versus small blind should definitely be one of my...
Yeah, playing against a small blind is very different than playing against a big blind.
Okay.
So yeah, like in Zoom in particular, like you should, when you're in the small blind, you should probably try to play a little bit wider than you normally would, or wider than a GTO, because the other players in the pool are going to be forwarding all of their junk out of the big blind automatically to see the next hand rather than defending, even though like they should be defending a lot of junk, especially against a small open. So if you're like 2.4 or 2 out of the small blind, you can often just steal the big blind very easily because people have already folded if they see a junk hand. So you can get away with stuff like that. So for example, if the small blind opens 50% at a GTO, if you know that your opponents are over folding because they just want to see the next hand, maybe that means you can open even 60 or 70% hands. So here once again you're up against a small blind on the right. Yeah, okay. Like if you're confident he's got a donkey range, then betting small to try and deny equity from like his pocket pairs and stuff is trying to get value from his pocket pairs when you've got an ace or a 10. A weak ace or a 10 is okay. I think we discussed that in the aces hands that you probably could have a small size as well. And then here on the turn, like this is a very brick. It's very much a brick turn. Doesn't really complete any of your draws. And then if you got like ace king, ace queen, right? If your opponent had the set of tens or the set of fours, they would check raise the flop against that small bet a lot of the time. So then this is one of those spots that you could probably overbet the turn, right? So it comes down to what happened on the flop. You bet small on the flop. Because you bet small on the flop, you would expect him to check raise fair amount of his sets and two pairs, right? And then the turn is a brick. It doesn't really bring too many new sets or new two pairs. Sure, if he's got the 7 8 sets, that's nice for him. But otherwise, his range is mostly a 10 or an ace. Okay, so then when you got ace king, you can overbet this turn to get value from an ace or a 10. Right, ace king, ace queen, and queen jack fits very, very well into that with the 8 out straight draw. Either the king or the 9 will make it straight there. So if I was playing this spot, I'd probably bet like 20 big blinds. Okay, so that's not a probe. So you need to work on your terminology there, and you should definitely not be folding ace king to one big blind bet, even though it's multi-way. So him betting one big blind is on multi-way like that is actually not that far off GTO to start with. So like when you go multi-way, you should be betting quite small, and you might feel like 1/7 of the pot is too small, but it's not really. Yeah, I mean, so okay, I guess because you're a bit deeper, you can go for this full bet size. Yeah, once again, like, not too sure why you're folding ace king in these spots. Like, and you got a full bet pot. Like all the time, you can felt ace king high on a lot of boards that aren't like queen high or jack high. Just because like you actually don't have that many pairs. So because you don't have that many pairs, ace king is the next thing, the next best thing. So probably don't let go ace king so easily in a full bet pot. Yeah, okay, I don't understand that fold at all. Can't be folding top pair blind versus blind too easily. Yeah, it's pretty standard pre-flop stuff so far. This is a zoom for everyone's super nitty.
Is the 2.5 and the 3x raises?
Sorry, I didn't catch the last bit.
Is the 2.5 and the 3x from the small blind okay? As an opening raise?
Yeah, I mean you can do a lot of stuff in the small blind as an open. If the players like are doing what you're doing and pressing check fold, like I would just open min out of the small blind with almost any two cards. Right. Because
I actually tag players that do that.
Yeah, good on you. It just means that they're overfolding by a significant margin blind versus blind. And like the correct folding frequency if against a min open from a big blind against a small blind open against a small min open is like 20%. So like if you're sitting there in the big blind and the small blind opens just to two big blinds, you should be continuing with anything except for the trashiest of trash. So so if you flip that around and you see that your opponent isn't, if your opponent's like auto folding their big blind, you can just like click it out of the small blind with basically any two cards depending on how often they fold. Yeah, so this four bet's going to be way too big. Yeah, it's way too big. Yeah, so you should just like click it back here rather than going for this size. You should not have called that. You should just went all in. Anyway, all right. So like, yeah, it's just your four bet size was wrong. And you should have just played 5-bet or fold when you put Tarpa stacking like that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why you're writing this note because you're never going to have that spot with that player ever again. So, no, it's not really a useful note for you to write. So the squeeze is a bit on the small side. Although you could consider folding king queen against the hijack open as well. Like here, for example, this is small blind versus hijack 2.5. You got king queen there being either raise or fold. So I haven't put the new squeeze ranges up, but even like if you go squeeze over 2, king queen is raise or fold. So got to be playing fairly tight depending on what position they're opening from. And a lot of players, especially in like Zoom and these low levels, will be playing ranges that are way too tight out of the earlier positions anyway. So erring on playing too tight against early position opens is fine. And then loosening up when there's fewer players behind is a better way to do it. Yeah, so this is just a fold. I'm not sure what you're expecting. Well, like what kinds of flops you're expecting by continuing this hand for the extra 1.5 big blinds.
I mean, the only reason I called is because of the theoretically good price you get to see a flop, even though it's multi-way.
Well, I mean, you get a nice price, but how often are you going to see the river? How often are you going to? How much do you have to pay to see the river? How much do you have to pay to win at showdown? Like your hand isn't going to flop strong hand. Isn't going to flop very strong all of the time. Yeah. Not too sure why you tagged him as that, because that was a totally okay thing to do. Well, what happened here on the right? D3 bet, did you? Oh, I missed it. Yeah, okay, so this is 3 bets too big. Way too big.
Nine x, 10x be okay? Sorry, yeah.
No, you just go like 8, maybe
Yeah.
maybe 9 at the most, but 8 is probably the way to do it. It's pretty absurd for him to be opening 3x out of the low check anyway. I mean, this is like your best bluff. I don't understand why you checked it back. Actually, no, checking it back's probably okay if you're trying to draw to a pair to beat ace queen high. Then again, it's just so strong. I just like bluffing it all the time. Yeah, so like they're on the turn, you could probably go for the stab. Yeah, like 9-8 offsuit is almost always a defend against a small blind open, so you shouldn't be auto folding that. And even against a handful of cutoff and button open sizes, you can defend 9-8 offsuit. Yeah, no. So this is once again, this is too big, and this is not a good hand to do this with. Like this hand is not strong enough.
Is it way too loose to 3-bet with the ace jack due to the positions?
Yep. Also, he opened pretty big, so you don't really have to continue too wide. Yeah, so again, as a 3-bet's, the 3-bet's too big. Yeah, I mean, 10-8 offsuit is usually an open from the small blind. Here 5 big blinds is too small. When you're out of position against a limp, you usually just want to 3-bet to the same size. So ISO to the same size you would a 3-bet against a min open. So here, if you open min, then you 3-bet to like 10 or 11, so you should ISO the same size. And ace-10 suited there is probably too weak to ISO for value, so it might just be okay to just flat that hand. Although I don't mind mixing it in ISO some chunk of the time.
So you're suggesting limping from the small blind with ace-10?
Yeah, so you overlimp there.
Find it to be because we're playing versus an EP limp, so versus EP and MP limp we can also limp.
Well, the trick with isolation raise sizes is to raise basically the same size as you would 3-bet over a min open. This squeezes it a bit big. Like the reason why you don't want to be squeezing these sizes is because you just get jammed into a lot against players that know anything about what they're doing. They'll just shove into you if you put a good chunk of your stack into the middle, and they're out of position. So you always got to watch out for that. Of course, if you're not playing against players that are too competent, you can get away with a variety of different free bet sizes from in position. But it's always important to at least practice for moving up to a higher stake than this, because they're not going to make those mistakes forever when you're moving up. Watching this, I'm getting the sense, and we've watched this in not sped up or anything. I'm getting the sense that like you're probably not thinking about any of the hands as deeply as you probably should be, and that's because like you're playing too many hands too quickly. So like you get 15 seconds to make a decision, so you either want to use that full 15 seconds a lot of the time, or you just want to play one table and then focus really hard on playing that one table really well, rather than trying to multi-table like this.
I mean, it's not like...
Yeah, because a lot of the time when you multi-table, especially when you're multi-tabling Zoom, you can make plays that are somewhat mindless, called kind of autopiloting, which is obviously not good. And then also trying to write notes while playing two tables is a bit excessive. You're very rarely going to be using these notes. And if you do use them, you're probably going to read too much into them. So,
Thomas, would you agree? Would you agree that,
so
especially
this
when
check raise here on the river? Sorry, this check raise here on the river is too small. Like, if you want to get value, get value. If he's got a flush. Sorry, there's no flush. If he's got a boat, then he's going to jam into you. So like, just try and get value when he's going to jack. So what were you saying, Martin?
I was just going to ask, like, would you agree, especially moving up as you enter higher stakes, but just in general, but it makes more, to me, I think it makes more sense to be able to have an observed win rate over a decent sample, just playing one table. Because if you don't have an observed win rate, adding volume, whether 2 tables, 3 tables, 4 tables, or even just grinding without an observed win rate, is just going to lead to a lot of trouble with variance and a lot of problems moving forward.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, if you can't win playing one table and thinking about each hand as good as you can, then you're certainly not going to be able to win playing multiple tables. And if you don't know what your win rate is, you don't know what your standard deviation is, it's like you've got no idea how big your bankroll should be. Was that 9-6? Was that 6-4 suited? You fold in a small blind. Like you don't know how big your bankroll is going to be. Like the back of the envelope calculation that I do is you take your standard deviation which you can calculate from, which you can get straight out of your database, and you divide that by your win rate, and then boom, that's how many binds you need. So say for example, your standard deviation is 150, big blinds 100, and then your win rate is 5, right? 150 divided by 5 is what? What's that? 37 or something? 30? There you go. So you would need 30 binds, and then like if it's 4, right? Like say something obscure like 4.2, you need 35 binds, right? Or if your win rate is like 143, and then like your win rate is like 3.75 BB per 100, you need 38. So like you need the lower your win rate, the bigger bankroll you need in order to ride that variance, to ride that standard deviation. And then like on the flip side, if you're absolutely crushing the game, then you actually don't need a bankroll that's that big, even if the variance is quite high, or if you play in a way that's relatively low variance, or the player pool that you're playing against plays low variance, then yeah, you don't have to have bankrolls that are quite as big.
Was the 7-6 suited hand a bad play?
Sorry, the 7-6 suited. What happened is you got 3-bet and then you made a flush and you got it down or something.
Mm-hmm. 3-bet pre.
The 3-bet was too big, and then I mean, he could probably just check back. I mean, you've also got the straight draw, so it's not too bad. Yeah. I mean, you could probably bet smaller on that turn. These flush completing turn cards, usually you want to be sizing down a bit. And he should just snap it off. I don't really know why you're hesitating. Like if he checks, you're going to jam anyway. So like if he checks, you're jamming anyway, and you lose for the same hand. So you shouldn't hesitate in spots like that.
I mean, the thing is, when he calls twice and then he shoves into us, then he's probably not doing it with anything than a flush. And so I wasn't really sure.
Well, I mean, if he's got a flush and then you check, you're going all in, and then you still lose. So it's not.
Okay, so it's the same thing effectively.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way you're not losing your stack when he's got that hand. So it's. I mean, unless you can see his hand, and you know that he's got that exact hand in that spot, then you can fold. But otherwise, it's just variance. But like, even though that you made that big 3-bet, they're still not folding like King 9 suited. So you probably shouldn't have 3-bet. And like if you're doing that exploitatively, you're making that big 3-bet exploitatively, knowing that they're not folding King 9 suited, that's fine. But like, don't put 7-6 suited into that range. Pretty sure we did plenty of videos and demonstrated a lot during the bankroll challenge about using multiple different open sizes and 3-bet sizes, blah blah blah, and having exploitative preflop strategies. I mean, he's just value bet, I think. Yeah, like here the eights. Usually, if you can beat, I mean, he's okay. For him to not bluff that hand, I don't know what he's doing. But usually, if your hand can beat like third pair and it checks down in single raise pot, you can most of the time get away with a value bet, unless it's like super wet and there's other stuff going on as well. But there, I don't think the range is really were really conducive to that kind of straight or flush. So probably just value bet, very small, try and get called by a single pair or ace high. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure all of this is hijack, this is a fold. The ace jack. Yeah, okay, so it's a blind versus blind that sets a snap call. And unless you're sure that they don't have just have ace king and ace queen there, does it never have that? And then maybe you can let it go, but I mean, blind versus blind, they're just going to show with ace king, ace queen a lot. So, and even some weird stuff like queen jack.
Do you think people are at these stage shoving in a way wide enough, small blind versus blind, to merit a call there?
I'm not sure, but you should usually just be, if you don't know, then you should try and play close to GTO. So if GTO is a call there and it is, you're probably winning a couple big blinds by calling against a strong player. You should just make the call, even though the variance is not so nice. Yeah, okay, so here you just call with any flush. You might not even have to call with like, you just limp and then rip it. So you're gonna have a lot of flushes there. Usually multi-play you want to go a bit smaller, and here is a good example of that. This particular board, like, it likes for you to go small, so the board is one that's good for a small bet size, and you're going multi-way, which is also good for a small bet size. So just make the small bet size.
I wasn't really sure what sizing to use there because when I was looking at the button versus big blind spots on the paired boards, I figured that most of the time we can see that go for the small sizing, and so my thought here would be maybe cutoff versus button could be somewhat similar, but then the
cutoff button, small blind. Usually, if you're in the cutoff, you want to be checking a lot. But that particular hand on that particular board seemed like an okay bet. but the size was wrong. So either check the hand and work with the rest of your range as mostly a check, or make sure you're using the correct size when you do make that bet. Alright. Not doing too bad so far. And so once again, through it was a bit too big. I mean, I'm pretty sure on stars you can set it to full color deck. Makes it a bit easier to see what's what. Yeah, 10-8 is probably an open in the small blind. Queen 9's open the button. Maybe you fold it to an open, but that's okay. All right, so that's that. So yeah, let's have a look at this. This is a small blind open range. So you've got 10-8 and a bunch of other stuff. So make sure you don't fold those small blinds. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? I mean, I know that was just a session at 5NL, but like hopefully you guys learned a few things from that. Even though you're only playing 5NL, you can and should definitely be trying to play well. I think a lot of the issues that you're having is that you're playing too many tables. Like you can't play 2 tables of Zoom there, and also think about each hand, give each hand sufficient depth. So like, sure, you might be autopiloting along, but then you're not learning anything by making those by actually playing. And then what's the point of playing 5NL if you're not learning? You're definitely not going to be making any kind of money by playing 5NL. Grinding a bankroll at 5NL is probably the worst thing you could do in the entire world, to be honest. So like if you're playing 5NL, you should be doing it to try and learn as much as you can. I drop the whole note taking HUD kind of bullshit. Just use the HUD to track your hands. Don't use the HUD to worry about statistics, and don't take too many notes about the players that you're playing against. because all that stuff is just distracting you from actually playing well. There's a lot of pre-flop leaks that you've got. The pre-flop sizes was one of the biggest ones, like using one size from each position, using the same size for the entire field rather than having a different size of the button, different size in the cutoff, and different size of the hijack and low jack. So like with each position, you should have different size if you want to go for a one size strategy. Otherwise, defaulting to min is probably the best way to do it, especially at Zoom, because players are just going to let go of their hand unless they have something strong. And when they do have something strong, like you don't want to have committed that many chips into the stack, committed that many chips into the pot anyway. So there's other stuff like folding out of the small blind and big blind when you should be defending a lot of the time. Folding some hands that were reasonably strong out of the small blind that could be opened, and there's other stuff as well that you can do to exploit players in the Zoom pool, where like they're auto folding those big blind and small blind hands. So because they're auto folding those hands, you should actually open wider when you're in the small blind, significantly wider when you're in the small blind. So here this is 50%. So if the players are auto folding their big blind a lot more than they should, you can open 60 or 70% out of the small blind, and the same is true of the button. So if we look at the button opening range, like here, this is like 45-ish%, or maybe you can open 50 or 55%, probably even wider, like maybe even like 60% if you know the small blind and big blind are folding too much, especially against the small sizes. Yeah, so what else was there? The 3-bet sizes were, especially in position, were far too big. You want to try and keep them roughly the same size regardless of what open size they're using. Of course, you do make small changes, but it's not like 4x, 5x, da da da. It's kind of like I want it to be close to a range of sizes that suit well to try and force my opponent to either play very well in terms of their opening size or have lost EV by using the wrong opening size. So like here you go to versus open, like versus 2.5 big blind open. You can just look at it. So button versus cutoff, for example, here you got 7.5 to 9.5. Like I saw against a 2.5, you're making 11 or 12, and if you do that, and I'm probably going to change this, and if you do that, the cutoff can just jam into you with their ace king and then like jacks and queens and stuff, which isn't too nice for you, because they end up being able to defend against your 3-bet by 4-betting all in, which is usually not ideal. Like a lot of the time you want to be seeing the flop if you've got a bluff. So yeah. So what else was there? The squeeze sizes were a bit strange, like overcalling, like overcalling out of the big blind. So even though these are like the old ones, like here this is big blind versus hijack and cutoff, min open, right? I mean queen 7 is just there, but like all these offsuit hands are all folded. There's a bit of queen 7. I think we talked about queen 7. Maybe I guess one one's a bit different. We're gonna have to update these. But the main idea is like when one person opens and there's a variety of calls, especially as the open size gets bigger, like even the big blind should not be continuing with too many hands at all, especially if it's not suited and connected or a pocket pair, which plays as well multi-way, right? Like if you're going to enter a multi-way pot, make sure your hand plays well multi-way. Which hands play well multi-way? Pocket pairs because they can flop a set. These suited connectors because they can flop really strong draws. And then there's like that's about it. I mean maybe a suited aces because they can flop the nut flush draw, but then there's like nothing much else. Like even these big offsuit broadways, they just play quite poorly because multi-way the showdown value of a top pair strong kicker hand is actually not that high. So yeah, I'm going to update these ranges soon. So that was pre-flop. Post-flop, there's a bunch of sizing mistakes. I think you got to pay a lot of attention to the pre-flop sizing. So if you go into like the training, and then you go into the quizzes, even the old quizzes and the old quiz answers, like there's a lot of stuff that goes into sizing and discussing sizes and 3-bit pots and 4-bit pots. So go through all 2018 if you can, and then watch all the answers to it. I mean, there's a lot of content there because each answer is like a 2 or 3 hour video going through the quiz and discussing in depth. And then you can work on 2019 as well. Probably won't be doing these weekly anymore once I finish with the 2019, so I might just do monthly quizzes. What else is there you could look at? Yeah, that's probably enough for now because there's a lot that you can do to improve. Tightening up your preflop game, making sure your preflop strategy is up to scratch is probably the first thing you want to do. Like some of your 4-bet sizes, some of your 4-bet sizes were a bit too big as well. Like I remember you opening button and then you faced a small blind 3-bet or something, and then you 4-bet to like 32 or something. So that's far too big. So 33, that's far too big. So like you usually want to 4-bet to a size that's very nice for you to not get jammed on. And like the guy like min 5-bet aces or something, like that's probably unnecessary because you've already put in such a large portion of your stack. If it just jams, you're calling with basically anything that you 4-bet to that size anyway. So like you should just rip aces there. So like you would have lost just as much if you ripped aces rather than min 5-betting it. And like when you do face them in 5-bet, you should just go all in yourself. So yeah. Because if he's min 5-betting correctly, he should have some like ace queen, ace jack, ace 5 stuff that has to call you're all in because it's got pot odds. If he's not min 5-betting correctly, then you can actually fold ace king there. It seems counterintuitive. Like if he's only got aces in his min 5-bet range, then yeah, you can actually fold ace king, which is a big argument against him min 5-betting there because like how does anyone construct their range well there? It doesn't make any sense. Like you could just jam and your hand's well disguised with the rest of your jamming range. So yeah, anyway. Any questions from anyone about all that?
You know, when I watch guys like Sauce and guys playing the Zoom and the 500 Zoom, they don't, none of their decisions are snap, like pre-flop, everything. And I know that they're very aware of timing tells and things, but I kind of think it's pretty good to just start bringing it into your game as early as possible. It's just slowing down and not making any quick decisions. And I mean, even if you know you're going to fold, just wait a few seconds and then fold. Like, do you think that's pretty good to get started even at the lower stakes?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about every decision is important, and then the whole timing stuff. Yeah, maybe you can you can worry about that at the low stakes, but just focusing on each decision that you have and thinking about why that decision is correct is probably going to do well for you. Even if you're leaning heavily towards one side, you should at least consider the other option, and reaffirm to yourself why that option is wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So yeah, a lot of the options, like usually when you're facing a bet, you've got the ability to raise as well. So, and a lot of people like, oh, they faced a bet and they have to decide between calling and folding, but why don't they just raise? Like the raise option is usually there, but a lot of people don't end up even considering it, because if they're playing too fast, then they can't, right? Yeah, so thanks for that question. Anyone else got any questions? Otherwise, we'll play the
that was good.
The exit music
I learned,
and call it a day.
Yeah, I learned stuff. Thank you. I did learn stuff. Thank you, sir.
Right. Well, hopefully everyone learned something. Do you have any questions, Zemel?
Thank you for the entire session and giving me the opportunity to talk the theory, and it's given me a sort of restart again in a way, because now I know that I need to preflop stop first, and then effectively the question is, once I've spent a lot of time with the preflop stuff and the quizzes, would you suggest the first stop for the pre would be the big blind versus button, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got GTO Plus, you can download stuff in the library, and you can look through that. I'm sure there's a few videos in the training. So there's a lot of stuff. Like those quizzes are going to take you ages to get through. So
No, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Once you've gone through them, or if you've gotten bored of them, then you can just message the Discord and ask what to study next, or how to get into solver work and that kind of stuff. Do you have a solver right now? Do you have GTO Plus?
Yeah, I do have GTO Plus.
All
Yeah,
right, good. That means you can download the stuff in the library and run through them and have a look at them as well.
Yeah, I've sort of already started doing that because I'm going over some of the big blind versus button stuff because of the articles and the videos available.
Good.
It just gives me a plan now, effectively, to restart this process because.
Yeah. I mean, especially like if you're grinding 5-0 and if you feel like you're not making any progress and you're not sure why, having someone else look at the way you're playing and giving you some tips is.
It's definitely helpful, and
It's
thank you very much.
helpful, right? And there's a lot. I'm sure there's plenty of players who in the Discord who are either in your position or have been in your position in the past. I mean, I know I certainly have been in your shoes. Like back when I was starting, I played would have been close to 1 million hands at the micros. So don't be ashamed of being in the micros or anything like that. It just takes a lot to overcome. And you'll get. I'm not saying that you're going to have to play 1 million hands, because back when I did, I didn't even have a solver. So, you having a solver and being able to learn stuff will be able to accelerate that learning process by significant margin, I think. Especially like if you're posting hands into the Discord and asking people for feedback. Even though it's only a 5-0 hand, people will still jump down your throat if you're doing something wrong. So, yeah.
Great. I have a sort of final question, which relates to practicing, because I did have a look at the GTO stuff. Would you? I kind of I study stuff and look at theory, but I also want to practice something by doing, and so an alternative to playing online, so actually grinding. Do you think the play versus the solution on the solvers are helpful, or does anyone know something that I can effectively practice playing?
Yep. So in the library, there's a few sims that are fully solved. If you've got early access, or all the sims in the early access, so these two are fully solved, and these ones down here aren't. These ones are like a few gigabytes each. These ones only a few megabytes each. So like you can play against a fully solved solution, or you can just run the turn yourself. In terms of practice, you can easily practice by doing a quiz. I'm sure everyone else who's done any of my quizzes will tell you how hard they are.
Cool, that's good.
So there's a lot of stuff you can go through. So there's the 2018 stuff, and then the 2019 stuff. Is got some more stuff. So yeah, the quizzes are quite quite challenging. So
okay.
Don't be afraid if you get a score that's very low. You should consider that a win, because then you've got more to learn, right?
Yeah. No, it just helps me to practice stuff.
When I care about the result, it actually beneficial for me to do the work again and again and again, and I'll sort of digest the theory in this way.
Yeah. Playing is one of the long the playing poker to learn poker is the way that a computer does it, and you're not a computer, so it's probably not the best way for you to do it. There's easier ways to learn poker, and you'll absorb a lot more by doing a quiz and thinking about hands deeply, right? A wide variety of hands deeply by doing these quizzes, because like each quiz is on a different kind of spot, different kind of setup, different kind of theme. Going through a bunch of these quizzes will help you sort of broaden your knowledge base, and then you can go through the quiz answers. I haven't put them all up yet. I probably should, but even the ones that are up, there's like hours and hours of content that you can just go through, and it's all available at your fingertips. You can watch it on the train, blah blah blah.
Okay.
Obviously these aren't these quiz answers, probably they're not like super high quality videos, because it's just a bunch of guys talking about the quiz answers for like 2 or 4 hours. So yeah, just go through it.
Great, thank you.
All right, great. Thanks so much, guys, for showing up. I will see you guys all in the next one. Let me play my trusty old theme song. I'll see you guys later. Bye now. Actually, while I'm at it, might as well thank the Patreon subscribers. So if you've reached the end of this video, thank you for sticking around. And to my patrons on Patreon, I'm thanking who am I thanking? This is going to load. I'm thanking Benito, Jared, Barbaros, and Julien. So thanks guys for the Patreon sub, and if you want to learn more about the Patreon, go to patreon.com/Zenith Poker. Hopefully that will load. You get all this stuff going on. If you get 3 behind or higher, I'll read your name out, 2 pair, I'll back your name down at the bottom of the video. And if you get like either straight or flush, you can get early access and a copy of my book. And then earlier than that, you can request specific training videos each month. So thanks guys.